This is Your Bird Story, a broadcast of bird stories told by everyday people about their interactions and relationships with wild birds in cities. This season is funded by the Voice for Nature Foundation. I'm your host, Georgia Silvera Seamans. Hi, everyone. I am pleased to be talking with Natasza Fontaine for the Your Bird Story podcast. I'm going to ask her to introduce herself to you all.
Hello, my name is Natasza Fontaine. I am an avian ecologist, a natural science illustrator. I consider myself a bioacoustician, also a birder in between all those things. Yeah, and I just enjoy being outside, enjoy being around birds, thinking about birds, dreaming about birds.
We first met through the Black Botanists Week organization, and so I've actually always thought of you as a botanist until recently. And so could you share with us which came first, the plants or the birds?
Well, they came together. I can't think about plants without thinking about birds, and I can't think about birds without thinking about plants. So for me, when I was a kid, I remember being very interested in gardening, interested in plants with the purpose of attracting birds. So they go hand in hand for me. And so now I'm always looking at habitat and always looking at how birds are using a habitat, what habitats we need to conserve, and how can we do restoration and so forth. Just thinking about how we can make the place better for birds. Yep, botany and birds together.
And when you talk about habitat, how are you defining that?
Well, natural habitat in a sense of wetlands or grasslands or transforming agricultural lands to be useful habitat for birds or shorelines. So that I would see in a broad sense is how I'm defining habitats.
Okay.
Or it could be your backyard as well. Backyard is a habitat. Yep.
And when you were younger and gardening and planting for birds, do you recall the kinds of birds you hoped would come to those spaces?
I was hoping for all the birds that don't even live in the United States because I didn't know. I was like, I'm like 7 years old. I'm going to Queensboro Library, going to go get a book on it's not like we had like a huge yard because I grew up in Queens Village. So we had like a little front yard that was like, I don't know how big it was, but it's just a patch of grass and like a little spot, So when I say gardening for birds, I'm talking about from a childhood imaginary level. So I was really hoping for I don't know, birds that definitely would not be coming to the garden. But also I would see birds like, okay, robins coming. So we had like a serviceberry tree, a small one in the front, very small. I wouldn't even consider it really a tree, more like shrub size. And so I remember watching robins coming to it and getting Juneberries, serviceberries, and then blue jays coming through the yard and tons of house sparrows that's what was primarily there. But I imagined different birds coming for sure.
It's so awesome to be a child. The imagination is unlimited, right?
Yeah.
Where do you call home now?
Right now, I am in the Florida Panhandle, so I am more Eastern Panhandle.
For folks who are not familiar with that landscape, what does it look and feel like?
So it's more northwest. It's Northwest Florida. What's really nice about it out here is that there's a variety of habitats in short distances. So lots of marshes, coastline. But then when you leave the coast, you're going into flatwoods, pine forests that are more slash pine, which historically were longleaf pine. You're going into wetlands and swamp areas. So yeah, there's a lot of different habitats here in short distances. Very, very diverse.
And are these some of the habitats where you do your field research?
Yeah, so I work primarily on a coast. I work on quite a few barrier islands and some that are land-based, but a lot of my survey sites, I have to boat to them. And they're primarily like coastal scrub and coastlines, dunes, lots of dunes.
And what are some of the bird species that are common to these kinds of landscapes?
You'll mainly see sanderlings and other shorebirds such as willets. Those are very common. And snowy plovers aren't that common, but they are around. And depending on the season, you can see piping plovers as well. Wilson's plovers, black skimmers, Caspian tern, which is my favorite tern right now. Forster's terns. Occasionally, you'll see a common tern if you get lucky, and lots of royal terns, sandwich terns. So lots of seabirds and shorebirds. And during migration, that's when you get to see a lot of fun stuff like Baird sandpiper, more of a rarity. American golden plover also is a rarity, but you can see them in this area. It's a rarity in this area. And least terns, that's also another cute one to see.
Sure. I had no idea that there were so many species of terns. What does a Caspian tern look like?
Caspian terns are the largest terns. It is ginormous in comparison to the other terns. It's got a really bright red lipstick bill. It's really a very heavy, chunky bill. And it's a white underneath, underparts, gray upper parts, with a little bit of black on the primaries and the wingtips. And it's just fierce. Like, I love it because it's a fierce bird. I mean, when it's flying around and it's calling, it is like, that used to be a dinosaur. It is fierce. The chicks are so cute because they're like these huge puffballs on these really chunky legs. They're so cute. The legs are so chunky.
Baby birds can be super adorable.
Yeah,
Yeah. Do you know how to make the call of the Caspian tern?
I do.
Ooh, would you mind doing it on air?
Sure, sure. So it's kind of like a wow. Wow. It's really this really like wow. It's an awesome sound. I love it.
Very striking vocalization right there. Why are you surveying these birds and their habitats?
I'm surveying them, monitoring their nests, monitoring their breeding to kind of get a better understanding of how well they're doing and understand the disturbance that happens and how it influences their breeding success, their nest success. And that's during their breeding season. And then during winter and migration, fall migration, we're monitoring which birds are passing through and how they're utilizing the habitat. So red knots, we'll see quite a few red knots passing through a lot of the sites that I monitor, and piping plovers, they breed. A lot of the ones that we see, because they're banded, we know their history a little bit. Once we report them, we learn their history. A lot of them would breed up in Michigan, Ontario, Nova Scotia area, sometimes in Virginia as well, I believe. We had a few from Virginia, I think. Not entirely sure about that one. I don't remember fully, but we get quite a few down here, and they spend the winter here and basically fatten up and get ready for the next breeding season. So during summer, we're monitoring nest, and during wintertime and fall migration, we're monitoring how and which species are utilizing which habitats.
So when you describe the Caspian tern, I got this sort of bright image in my head, and I was like, of course, Natasza would be able to describe a bird so well, because you're not only are you a birder, an avian biologist, but you're also an artist. So you have a really good sense of observation and description. And I would love for you to share with us how you developed this as an artist. So when did your passion for art emerge, and how have you developed the different art forms that you use?
I would always consider myself like a scribbler. And I mean, just being brutally honest, going through like when you're in like junior high school, going to high school, you're trying to figure out what you want to do. I've always had, this interest in nature and biology and ornithology and botany, but I was also always sketching and kind of like illustrating and had this creative eye, I guess. And at the time period, I did not pursue a degree in bio because I just felt like I'm an artist. Artists aren't smart, kind of thing. Like that was,
Mm.
artists don't think linear and, kind of like there was no merging and support to say, like, hey, actually, the best researchers sometimes can be artists as well, because the creative aspect of it is, how you can really come up with really amazing solutions. But at the time period, I didn't know. I felt like I had to choose. Like, everyone's like, choose a major, choose a major. We have this immense pressure in undergrad. Choose something that you're going to do for the rest of your life now. And it's like, what? So I just chose at the time what I was like, all right, well, let me just choose art and go from there, kind of thing. And so I just continued illustrating and learning more about art in different mediums and so forth. And I never liked the subjects that were given to me. So
Mm.
I kind of stopped illustrating for a little while because I was like, I don't want to draw people. And I'm just being brutally honest. Like, I don't want to draw human civilization. I don't. Like, that's just never been something like I want to sit here and draw this model like in class and studio. I just not been very into it. And
Yeah.
so, I had stopped for a little while. And then I found through searching, because I wanted to start illustrating again, I just did a search and I found a program actually at New York Botanical Garden for
Mm.
botanical illustration. And I was like, what? Wait a minute, put the brakes on. So I started taking classes there. They had a natural science illustration certificate at the time. They don't have it anymore. It's just botanical illustration now. But I took a class there and I was just like, whoa, this is what I want to draw. And so from there, it just spiraled from there and just kept going up higher and higher and higher from like drawing plants, and then going deeper and going to like the American Museum of Natural History and drawing from the specimens there. I was going to Yale Peabody and taking the class that they
Wow.
had there. Like I was getting on Metro North and like living in Manhattan and then getting on Metro North for 2 hours, trekking it all the way to Yale Peabody so I can illustrate from the museum collection because the display is just so beautiful and there's never that many people there, so it's always like hours of intimacy with all, especially the ornithology hall there. It's hours by yourself, which was great. So I kind of just was like, wow, I can actually do this. Like, this is
Mm.
my subject. This is what I want to think about all the time. Well, most of the time. And so, yeah, so that's basically how my interest in art and as being an illustrator, I was able to merge the two of science and art together. And then from there, it just, like I said, it just kept going up and up. I just kept finding these like little avenues to go down as I just kept searching for people to collaborate with, people to learn from. And yeah.
And this year's Bird of the Year in Birding magazine published by ABA, the Golden-Winged Warbler
Mhm.
is illustrated by you.
Yeah.
I have the magazine very close to me. It's beautiful,
Thank you.
all of the images that you've created for this issue. So before I ask you how all that came together, couldn't you describe what a golden-winged warbler looks like for folks?
So we'll start off with it. It's really cute. That's the first description. It's really cute. Very small warbler size in a sense that it basically fits in your hand. One, like it could just sit in your palm. You don't need two hands for it to like if you're holding onto a warbler. And so golden wing warbler has golden wings, wing bars, not the entire wing. The upper parts are kind of like a nice smoky charcoal gray, and they have kind of like a gold cap, that sometimes have a little bit of orange in there, but that's really if you're getting close. I mean, you're not going to normally see that. The underparts are white, and the bill is very, very, how would I describe? I guess pointed would be like the simplest way of describing it because it's an insectivore. So yeah, it's cute, mostly smoky charcoal, light, like it's a nice mix of grays.
Hmm.
And so it's not just like one solid smoky gray. It's a nice mix of grays and then with white underparts. And when you see it, the gold on it, on the wings, kind of yellow gold, it really pops. I mean, it's just like when you see it, you know that that's a special bird that you're seeing.
I would encourage folks to Google Golden-Winged Warbler. And if you don't already subscribe to Birding Magazine, trying to find a way to get at that issue because the illustrations are gorgeous. How did you get involved in that commission?
So I just did what sometimes I usually do, which is just ask people like, hey, can I do this? How do I get to do this? Like, I want to do this. So how do I get to do this? I don't know if it's like intuition or yeah, sometimes I guess have like this extra spark that pushes me to do certain things. And then like sometimes it doesn't work. And then other times it works out fantastic. So this was one of the fantastic times. So I emailed them and I reached out to them. I wasn't even sure if I was reaching out to the right person. I just sent them this like, hey, can you tell me how does this work? You know, I'm interested in doing this. How does this work? And sent them my resume and sent them, you know, a few illustrations. And basically that was it. I basically just pursued something that I had dreamed to do in a nutshell. And, you know, I sent the email not expecting a response, not really expecting anything to come of it. It was just one of those things of like, okay, I want to do this. All right, I'm going to reach out and just let it flow kind of deal.
Great call.
Yeah. This is one of the times it worked out. There are sometimes people are like, I think you're kind of overstepping right now. Like, sorry. I just wanted to ask. I just need to ask. No, it's fine, but I needed to ask.
Yeah, right. I mean, you always have to ask because what is the worst response is no.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And if it's no, then it's no.
What was your approach to illustrating this species? You even include a part of the habitat in the illustration. So just generally, what was your approach? Did you go into it knowing how you wanted to visualize this bird for readers, or is it something that happened as you worked with the species and its habitat in your research for the piece?
I've seen Golden-Winged Warbler a few times, and I've seen them on their wintering grounds. When I found out that it was Golden-Winged Warbler and that I was doing this and so forth, I wasn't sure exactly what I was going to do, but because it's a migratory species, I felt like this is an opportunity for me to tie in how conservation should come full circle. Like we need to make efforts to really include full circle conservation efforts on the breeding grounds and in wintering habitats. It wasn't necessarily only about conservation full circle for this species and for the habitats, but it was also like I was thinking about it from the perspective of researchers, biologists that are unsung in the Caribbean, in Latin America, you know, in Central and South America, and how, as biologists in North America, it should be all inclusive. And so it wasn't just thinking about from the perspective of the species, but also from the human perspective of let's all work together and let's, you know, recognize biologists, researchers, you know, conservationists that are in those areas, as I mentioned, that their work is important, their findings are important because if they're not down there doing what they are doing, we will lose the species. So it has to be recognized on both ends and come full circle. And so that was one of the inspirational thoughts that I had when I wanted to include both habitats. For me, there was a no-go. I didn't know how I was going to do it, but I knew that that idea was something that I wanted to plant in there.
Yeah, and that's really important, right? You use the term unsung heroes, and that's definitely seems to be something that North American, meaning the US and Canada, that's the science community is taking more seriously. As someone who looks out for birds during migration season here in New York City, I mean, I'm looking at the landscape in New York City and figuring out where certain species might be. But once the birds leave, we only have them for short periods of the year. And then what is it like for them? I'm thinking now of like spring in the city. I can see the phenology that's happening in front of me, but I have no idea how the birds are gonna respond because I'm not aware of the weather that's happening during their winter ranges. So it is really important to advocate for the entire life cycle of a species.
Exactly. That was my goal in highlighting the significance of researching the entire life cycle.
Yeah. So I have a final question for you, and maybe tying back into birds you imagined coming to your front yard when you were a child. Do you have a list or even just one bird that you'd like to illustrate next?
Well, I have a few projects in the back of my mind that I'm going to be flushing out soon, but those are more commission kind of projects. When I was working in the Chihuahuan Desert last winter, I got really inspired by sparrows. I got really inspired by sparrows, and so I was thinking how nice it would be if I illustrated like a green-tailed towhee or a black-throated sparrow or sagebrush sparrow. In general, I would say that I am going back and forth of going down a sparrow route sometime soon. But I don't know. Maybe Caspian Tern will come before then. I'm not sure.
Yes, I would love to see that bold red lip. Well, it's been really great talking with you, Natasza. Thank you
Yeah, this has been
for
fantastic.
your time. And I have a long list of birds that I now need to look up on the internet to see what they look like. Thank you.
Yeah, of course. Thank you.
Thank you for tuning in to this episode of Your Bird Story. Like, share, subscribe, and we'll see you back here next month.